Scene 1 of education unfolds with quiet intensity, using academic anxiety as the doorway into a moment of emotional recognition that feels deeply familiar to many queer women whose earliest awakenings were less about overt desire and more about being seen when they were most afraid. Lily's pacing captures a specific kind of vulnerability, the fear of failure that carries consequences, beyond grades, threatening belonging, stability, and self-worth. And her anxiety resonates with anyone who has learned to equate performance with permission to stay. Jessica's calm presence contrasts Lily's spiraling thoughts, and when she reveals that Lily has passed, the relief is not just academic but existential, a release from the terror of being deemed insufficient. Jessica kneeling beside Lily to reassure her is framed not as dominance or rescue but as grounding, a choice to meet fear at eye level, and it is in this gesture that the emotional shift occurs. For queer audiences, this moment reflects how attraction often emerges first as safety, as the recognition that another woman can hold space for your fear without judgment. The slow romance that begins is not defined by action, but by awareness, by the sudden realization that comfort itself can feel intimate, and that being cared for can awaken feelings one has not yet learned how to name. Society's discomfort with women expressing love for each other lingers here in the need for subtlety, in the way the film allows connection to bloom through reassurance, rather than declaration, challenging the assumption that queer intimacy must be dramatic to be meaningful. This discomfort persists because women's emotional bonds are often trivialized as nurturing rather than acknowledged as potentially transformative, especially when they occur in spaces structured around evaluation and authority. The scene carefully navigates this by centering Lily's internal experience, emphasizing that what changes is not behavior but perception, the shift from seeing Jessica as an evaluator to seeing her as a person whose presence matters. For women broadly, the scene speaks to the hunger for affirmation in environments that prioritize assessment over care, and to the way relief can soften defenses long enough for honesty to surface. Lily embodies the woman who has learned to brace for disappointment, while Jessica represents the possibility of gentleness within systems that often feel unforgiving. Their interaction mirrors real-world pressures on queer women to minimize feelings that arise in moments of support, to question whether gratitude or admiration is appropriate, and to police their own emotions before anyone else does. By keeping the focus on reassurance, proximity, and emotional safety, education challenges viewers to recognize that queer connection often begins not in bold gestures, but in quiet moments where fear is eased and trust takes root, offering LGBTQ+ audiences a reflection of how becoming visible can start with something as simple and as profound as being told you are. Scene 2 of education deliberately unsettles rather than reassures, using the language of opportunity and mentorship to explore how desire, validation, and power can blur in spaces where young women are taught to equate being chosen with being worthy. Barbara's arrival at Lainey Gray's home is framed as an honor, already weighted with expectation, and Lainey's prim, officious demeanor reinforces the authority of the setting, reminding viewers that this is not a casual encounter but one structured by hierarchy. For queer audiences, this moment resonates with a familiar tension, the hunger to be recognized colliding with the fear of misreading what recognition costs. The program's vagueness, its whispered promise of something romantic, creates an atmosphere of ambiguity that mirrors how queer desire has often been communicated indirectly, through suggestion rather than clarity, especially in institutional spaces where women's feelings are expected to remain secondary to achievement. Barbara's admission that being chosen makes her feel wanted and needed is deeply human and painfully relatable, capturing how affirmation can feel like oxygen to women who have learned to measure their worth through external approval. Lainey's emphasis on privilege subtly reframes Barbara's vulnerability as something to be earned and guarded, reflecting broader societal patterns, where access and intimacy are positioned as rewards rather than mutual exchanges. The kiss, presented without spectacle, lands as a rupture rather than a culmination, forcing both Barbara and the audience to confront the emotional dissonance between consent, desire, and power. Lainey's oddly phrased assertion that Barbara is here to show me what you know underscores the imbalance, suggesting that Barbara's value is being assessed even in moments of supposed intimacy. For lesbian viewers, this scene may evoke discomfort alongside recognition, recalling times when attraction was entangled with admiration for someone in authority, and when the line between being seen and being shaped by another's expectations felt dangerously thin. Society's discomfort with women loving women persists here not because the feelings are queer, but because they are embedded in unequal structures, and the film wisely refuses to romanticize that tension. Instead, it invites reflection on how queer women are often taught to justify desire through mentorship, artistry, or education, as if love must be earned intellectually to be acceptable. Barbara symbolizes the woman at the threshold, eager to belong and uncertain what belonging demands, while Lainey embodies the gatekeeper, both offering and withholding clarity. By leaving the future of the program unresolved, the scene resists fantasy and instead foregrounds the emotional complexity of becoming visible in spaces that promise growth while quietly demanding compliance, encouraging audiences to sit with unease as part of an honest reckoning, rather than rushing toward reassurance. Scene 3 of Education is deliberately uneasy, using the language of confidence and care to expose how affirmation, power, and desire can intertwine in ways that feel validating on the surface while raising difficult questions beneath. And the film's strength lies in allowing that tension to remain visible rather than smoothing it over. Barbara entering Miss Ariel's office already carries the weight of having been evaluated, chosen, and shaped by an institution that frames itself as nurturing, and Ariel's opening question about how long Barbara has been with us reinforces the idea that belonging is conditional and monitored. The praise that follows, couched in metaphors of safety protocols and precision, blends physical discipline with moral guidance, suggesting that growth is something overseen rather than self-directed. When Barbara says she feels more confident and knows her worth now, the line resonates strongly with queer audiences who recognize how often self-worth is learned through external validation, especially for young women whose identities have been minimized or questioned. Ariel's response, offering affection alongside affirmation, collapses boundaries in a way that feels emotionally significant but structurally fraught, illustrating how care can become indistinguishable from control when one person holds authority over another's progress. The birthday gift is symbolically loaded, presented as generosity and celebration, yet it reinforces Barbara's role as someone being curated and rewarded, a dynamic many women recognize from environments that promise empowerment while quietly shaping behavior and self-image. Ariel's statement that we treat our girls very well here speaks less to individual connection than to institutional language, emphasizing collective ownership and care that can feel comforting even as it erases autonomy. For lesbian and broader LGBTQ+ viewers, this scene may echo experiences where queerness was first affirmed in spaces that were not entirely safe, where desire and mentorship overlapped and left lingering confusion about consent, gratitude, and obligation. Ariel's inquiry about whether Barbara has tried the teachings reframes intimacy as curriculum, positioning emotional and personal growth as something to be demonstrated and assessed, and Barbara's eagerness to show what she has learned reflects the pressure many women feel to perform confidence in order to keep belonging. Society's discomfort with women loving women is complicated here by the presence of hierarchy, as the issue is not queer desire itself but how easily it can be framed as acceptable when it aligns with authority and structure, and suspect when it does not. That discomfort persists because women's intimacy is often judged not on its authenticity, but on whether it reinforces existing power systems. Barbara symbolizes the woman who believes growth must be witnessed to be real, while Ariel embodies the gatekeeper who defines what growth looks like, and their interaction mirrors real-world pressures on queer women to justify desire as education, healing, or progress, rather than simply truth. By ending on Ariel's quiet approval that Barbara is following the lessons, the film leaves viewers with an unresolved question about agency, inviting reflection rather than fantasy, and challenging audiences seeking authenticity to consider not just when desire is visible, but under what conditions it is allowed to exist. Scene 4 of Education intensifies the film's interrogation of power, desire, and permission by placing Lily in direct confrontation with an authority figure who frames intimacy as instruction. And the scene's emotional charge comes not from attraction but from the unease of being evaluated for readiness rather than asked for willingness. Lily's introduction, "Charlotte sent me," immediately situates her within a chain of trust that she herself does not fully understand. A dynamic many queer women recognize from early experiences where access to community or knowledge is mediated through others who claim to know what is best. Ariel's response, promising that Lily could become something special, something powerful, taps into a deep hunger for transformation and recognition, particularly familiar to young women who have been told their confidence or attitude must be refined before they are allowed to take up space. Ariel's insistence on control within the room exposes how environments that claim to empower women can still rely on dominance and obedience, reflecting broader societal patterns where women are encouraged to grow only within tightly managed boundaries. Lily's confusion about what kind of education she is meant to receive underscores the opacity of the situation, mirroring how queer desire has often been cloaked in euphemism, framed as mentorship or guidance to avoid naming what is actually at stake. When Ariel lists nutrition, exercise, love, the pause before love carries weight, suggesting that intimacy is being positioned as curriculum rather than connection, something to be learned rather than mutually discovered. For lesbian and LGBTQ+ audiences, this moment may resonate as uncomfortably familiar, recalling times when desire was implied but never clearly articulated, leaving young women to navigate consent amid suggestion and pressure. Ariel's assertion that Charlotte must have already shown Lily reinforces a troubling assumption that readiness can be inferred rather than expressed, and Lily's hesitation becomes the most important emotional beat of the scene, signaling an internal boundary forming even as external pressure mounts. Ariel's tactic of invoking scarcity, suggesting other girls are eager for the opportunity, reflects a common mechanism of control that plays on fear of exclusion, a fear especially potent for queer women seeking belonging. Society's discomfort with women loving women persists here not because of the feelings themselves, but because of how easily those feelings are manipulated when they lack social protection or clear language. Lily represents the woman at the threshold of self-knowledge, sensing desire but unsure how to claim it safely, while Ariel embodies the gatekeeper who conflates authority with intimacy, offering validation contingent on compliance. By refusing to resolve the tension cleanly, the scene challenges viewers to distinguish between visibility and coercion, and to recognize that queer authenticity requires not just acknowledgement of desire, but conditions of respect, clarity, and choice.